The Fisherman and Mermaid's Tale, Part 2 by Efrossini Chaniotis. Now with legs and feet she took her first steps on the earth, standing on his feet as he taught her how to walk. It's so romantic. And by the time she had gotten the hang of it, they had both developed a voracious hunger and curiosity to take in everything that the earth had to offer them. So they became great travellers. But at the end of each year they always returned home to the fisherman's hut so the mermaid could plant the seeds of their journey, for she had discovered that the sea and the earth were one and the same, quickly making the mermaid a gifted gardener. She didn't just collect seeds from their travels, but she had learnt how to form seeds out of their experiences. And then, with bare hands, she would push her fingers into the soil and, almost like divining rods, sense which point in the earth was the perfect spot for each seed to be planted. Then she would commune with the earth, gain her cooperation so as to bring whichever nutrients were most needed for each seed to thrive. So you can imagine the phantasmagorical, extraordinary garden that she had growing around the fisherman's hut. Of the many adventures she had digging with her hands in the soil, that is particularly notable happened in the early days of her wanderings in the forests that surrounded the fisherman's hut. Having recently learnt how to walk, one day she was drawn to venture alone into the lush green mountains to feel the land she could see on the horizon. It is here she found that magic family heirloom, a pearl of gold that her and the fisherman had looked for in their first year together under the sea. But it was not in the sea after all, but deep in the ground of a mountain's forest. By their 8th year together, they travelled less, and curiously, the fisherman started adding more salt to his food, and often left the water running from the taps wherever he went in the house, seemingly absent-mindedly. The mermaid didn't nag him, it wasn't her style. She just quietly paid attention. But the most extraordinary thing was that in the early morning, in the moments before waking up, he heard the most incredibly beautiful, breathtaking song, perhaps a siren's call. And the mermaid, always by his side, never once heard it. One evening, as was customary for the two of them to take a walk along the beach on nights when the stars were particularly bright, meaning the moon was nowhere to be seen, they heard this enchanting singing coming from behind some large rocks at the mouth of the sea. They looked at each other, and without saying a word, they both knew that this was the fisherman's song, and this time she could hear it too. Again, without needing to say a word, they both knew that he had to go into the water and find out who was singing this beautiful song, for he had woken with this voice in his head every single morning for an entire year. The mermaid stood close to the water's edge and watched over him as he took his first steps in. 1, 2, 3, and on his third step in, he submerged. The moments passed, and he wasn't coming up. The mermaid remained calm, but stared intently where he had entered. Just at that moment, a star that was shining with particular vigour let out a beam of light that split into two as it reached her eyes, then rebounded, hitting the point on the water's surface where he had disappeared, creating a diamond shape of light. And just at that moment, a beautiful dolphin leapt out. It was now her turn to enter the water. With each step, the scales on her legs filled with life. She swam a little further, and climbed onto the dolphin's back. The fisherman had transformed into a dolphin to bring them both back to the sea. The fisherman